and welcome to the SCI Guys, the show where we talk about the crazy, weird, and wonderful stories from the science world. I'm Corey, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, the limited Luke Cutforth.
Excuse me, we all have our limits.
This week, we're talking about consumption and capitalism. But first, we got a wee YouTube comment. This one says, y'all should do an episode on tuberculosis and have John Green on as a guest. It's something that needs to be spoken about more. Well, we're doing that, but we ain't got no John Green.
So nice to see you, John. How are you doing?
I'm Paper Towns, Alaska.
It's like it's in the room.
Stars. DFTBA or DFTB gay. Makes you think.
Don't forget to be gay. I forgot. Always forgetting.
I've got a question for us all to start this one off. And the question is, have you ever had tuberculosis?
I don't think so.
You might. You don't know. Who knows? Anyway, get down to the comments and answer the question because, engagement or whatever. Anyway, let's start the episode. What is TB?
Tuberculosis.
What is that?
Some kind of infection.
Yeah, it's a bacterial infection. It usually affects the lungs. It's caused by a bacterium called Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Pretty good name there.
That is a good name.
Does what it says on the tin.
What was named first? Mycobacterium tuberculosis or tuberculosis? I'm guessing tuberculosis.
Probably tuberculosis, yeah. So, this is from the World Health Organization, right? They've got a bunch of stats and all of this. So, a total of 1.6 million people died from TB in 2021, which is kind of shocking to me because I always thought, consumption was just like the, what ladies coughed into their handkerchiefs in,
it's like a
period pieces.
A Jane Austen novel or something.
Exactly, right? It's I thought it was something that we were like, oh, we're fine now.
This is our Western privilege coming through.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's the 13th leading cause of death and second leading infectious killer after COVID-19, above HIV and AIDS.
Wow.
I know, right? And we'll talk a little bit about a connection between TB and HIV in a sec. But in 2021, an estimated 10.6 million people fell ill with TB worldwide. 6 million men, 3.4 million women, and 1.2 million children, the third gender. TB is in all countries. So, say Western privilege. It is in all countries and all age groups. And it's also curable and preventable, which is why we have some Western privilege there, because we have access to the things that make it quite curable and preventable. However, we'll get into this in a sec. There is a multi-drug resistant TB. I'm not going to get into what that is right now, but later on in the episode, we'll sort of circle back to that. And through diagnosis and treatment of TB between 2001 and 2021, 74 million lives were saved. An estimated 74 million lives were saved from just diagnosis and treatment over the course of 21 years, which is insane. Very good. I mean, this is a really difficult sort of topic to start talking about because it's one of those situations where it is horrible that this many people are dying of something that is ultimately relatively preventable, right? But also, on the other hand of that, it is really great that we have saved so many lives up until this point. And it's one of those situations where I'm just like, it's so awesome. We've come so far. This is so good. Let's just do the rest of it, please.
You're like 90% of the way there, guys.
Yeah, it's that extra like 5-10%. Just do it. Just do it. And we'll see what the problem the problem is in a bit. But we'll probably talk a little bit more about TB first. I mean, for example, the World Health Organization says that by 2030 is when we want to sort of end the TB epidemic. So it's among the health targets of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So basically, United Nations are like, by 2030, we wanna stop this TB epidemic, because this is the thing, right? I didn't know that TB was such a big problem until I started researching this episode. And the reason I started researching this episode is quite literally because of that comment and John Green talking about it. Otherwise, I'd have had no idea. And that's, I am fairly tuned into a bunch of, these sort of things because I do SCI Guys, right? And I've not really come across TB being the big issue that it is until very, very recently, which is mad. Maybe that's on me, but then what about you? Did you know any of this?
Like I said, I thought tuberculosis was from a Jane Austen novel.
Yeah.
Of that time, or like from Wuthering Heights or something. and not in the present day until I saw John Green talking about it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I genuinely think of it as like, oh yeah, that's the one that the girl from Moulin Rouge had, right? That was the ending. That was Moulin Rouge, right? It was it was consumption. That's just, if you're watching a period piece and a lady's coughing into a handkerchief, that's what it is, right? Like, and actually, no. We just think that because we were lucky enough to be born in a country wherein the wealth is just concentrated. And so we get to have lovely things like free healthcare and access to medical, treatments and whatnot for preventable and curable diseases, which should be a given, but evidently is not. And I kind of want to talk about the impact as well. This is also from the World Health Organization. They're just a really good resource on all of this stuff. I could go to the CDC, I could go to the NHS, but World Health Organization? Who is better?
Very good. That took me a second there. Very good.
So TB mostly, it says, affects adults in their most productive years, which is a weird way of saying that.
The Economists got hold of that piece of information there.
Yeah, it's a bit odd. But over 80% of cases and deaths are in low and middle income countries, right? So all age groups are at risk. All countries, it sort of exists everywhere across the world, but 80% of cases are in low and middle income countries, which is awful, right? That would be sort of, if we're looking at that, that's probably about 800,000 of the 1.6 million people were in low and middle income countries. And
I suppose that's because it's an infectious disease. That is a self-fulfilling prophecy, in that where the tuberculosis is where the tuberculosis is going to spread and stay being.
It is a communicable disease. We'll get into it because all of the information is here, and it is a little bit infuriating. So it also goes on to say, the World Health Organization also go on to say that 1 in 2 or close to 1 in 2 TB affected households face costs higher than 20% of their household income, according to the latest national TB patient cost survey data. So 20% more than you are making is how much your expenses become when you're affected by TB, which just a bit of quick math there for you, Luke. 120% is more than 100%.
That's more than all of it.
Yeah, and 100% is all of it.
Yeah.
So that's 20% deficit. That's 20% in the hole, which is not good.
More than you have.
Yeah.
A lot of the time.
Which means you are in negative money.
You have to take out a loan.
I mean, if you can, like it's like, we're being relatively sort of light about this, but only to
of course.
No, but only to underline how serious and horrible this is, right? Like, this is genuinely horrid.
Even the idea that you have to, like, okay, so you've either got savings or you have to take out a loan to pay to be, and then when you're now not got tuberculosis, the bank's like, right, you pay up for still being alive.
Yeah,
Come on.
Up. Yeah, go on.
Pay up.
We saved you from TB, so give us money now. Yeah, and if we talk about where it is in the world, 46% is in the Southeast Asian region, and then African region is 23%, Western Pacific is 18%, and so around 87% of new TB cases were in the 30 high TB burden countries, with more than 2/3 of the global total in Bangladesh, China, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, India, Indonesia, Nigeria, Pakistan, and the Philippines. It's not great that it's very concentrated in high population countries that don't have huge white populations.
Oh God. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You're so right.
And I'm not saying, like, I know people are going to take this out of context and say something like, oh, this guy says that this bacteria is racist. No.
Do you think someone's actually going to say that?
Yes.
Yeah. You read the comments.
You don't see the worst ones, I swear to God.
I'm living in my commentless privilege.
Mate, you should see I don't even want to show you some of the hate that we get.
Oh God.
But no, yeah, I mean, someone will probably say that, and I need to be entirely explicit here and say, no, I don't think bacteria are racist. What I think is that wealth is accumulated and concentrated in certain countries, Western countries, specifically Western countries with a lot of white people. And racism, from human people results in less funding going to those other countries which have fewer white people. Yes, most of the world is not white, right? So you would expect that more people who are not white are being infected than people who are white, right? Just on numbers alone. But this isn't a case of, this sort of averaging out statistically, right? It's not a case of, oh, well, yeah, more people in India are getting this, but there's just more people in India. No, they're not sharing an equal burden, okay? Like, it's not quite that simple. But yeah, I mean, it would be, I think, foolish to say that racism isn't an element at play here, and that will become more apparent as we move through this episode. But yeah, I mean, also, if we talk about the effects of it, if you've got a compromised immune system, for example, if you've got HIV, malnutrition, if you've got diabetes, and all of these sorts of things, they can put you at higher risk if you smoke tobacco, higher risk of becoming ill from TB. And yeah, I mean, if we talk about HIV again, it says people living with HIV are 16 times more likely to fall ill with TB disease than people without HIV. It does specify that the uncertainty is 14 to 18, so 14 to 18 times more likely to fall ill with TB diseases than people without HIV.
But crucially, it's more than 10. More than 10 times.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll haggle over the details after it's more than 10. I think we're good.
Yeah. No, I think we're bad, actually, mate.
Sorry, yes.
And TB is the leading cause of death among people with HIV, which I wasn't aware of, actually.
Yeah.
I would have thought it was something like pneumonia or whatnot, although maybe pneumonia is then caused by the TB infection. I don't know, actually, to be perfectly honest with you, Luke. But yeah, no, leading cause of death in people with HIV, which is genuinely horrible. It says that they form a lethal combination, which they both basically sort of egg each other on. And so it says here the percentage of notified TB patients who had a documented HIV test result in 2021 was only 76%, up from 73% in 2020. And obviously the African region, the World Health Organization African region, has the highest burden of HIV-associated TB because there's obviously an HIV/AIDS epidemic in Africa. It's a continent. Obviously, I'm not saying it's a country. It's a continent. We're being very, very non-specific there. Just want to clarify that. But yeah, it says overall in 2021, only 46% of TB patients known to be living with HIV were on antiretroviral therapy, ART. Here's the thing. Do you know what gay man just popped down to the clinic and get?
PrEP.
PrEP.
Well, yes, this is another thing. It's like, not only is this like, oh, we're talking about tuberculosis, a disease which for the most part we know what to do about, we're also then going, and it combines really horribly with HIV, this other thing that we, for the most part, know what to do about.
Yeah.
But we're not completing the job.
Oh, we're doing it for the gays. In
the West.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The gays in the West. Yeah, we're doing enough, aren't we? We're not helping under minorities, are we not? Wow, Luke, you're really asking for a lot, aren't you?
This kind of woke nonsense that's tearing America apart at the seams.
Good Lord. Why can't we just go back to the AIDS crisis where we just pretended that it didn't? Oh, wait, we're basically still doing that with other parts of the world. Good to know. Good to know that we don't learn from our mistakes. It's not even learning from our mistakes, is it? Because it's not
continuing to make the same mistake.
Continuing to do the same thing that you don't view as a mistake because it's not a mistake to you if you're benefiting from it. Anyway, so shall we talk about the signs and symptoms of TB?
Yes.
Okay, so before we get into that, I will ask you what you think the signs and symptoms of TB are, but I do want to clarify that you could be infected with TB but not have active TB. Now, if you've got a TB infection and you don't get ill and you're not contagious, you have latent TB. So that would mean that the bacteria is sitting there in you. It's just kicking about and it's not, making you sick, and you're not going to be able to pass it on to anyone else. So that's quite important. That you could have TB, but you're not going to pass it on if you have latent TB,
like HIV when you take your PrEP.
Well, yeah, I suppose, yeah. So that would be the viral load being brought down to so low that it's not communicable. This is likely kind of a different sort of mechanism. But apparently, in 2014, the estimate for global latent TB was 23%.
What?
Yeah.
Of people?
Yeah.
That's great. And it's when it's latent TB, you have this thing in you. Is it ever going to become unlatent?
It could do.
Is it like sleeping and it might spring up?
Yeah, it could do, but it might not, right? I mean, to be fair though, I mean, you got to think about this. It sounds bad. We have bacteria
all the time.
Everywhere. And like all the time, like yes, in fact, if we don't have them, we're going to be worse off, right?
Yep.
That's why you kind of feel sick when you're on antibiotics. That's why you start to have stomach issues, because all the bacteria in your gut that you need, that keep you healthy, that help you digest things and whatnot, some of them get taken out too, and your body's all out of whack, right? But yeah, no, I mean, like, we have bacteria absolutely everywhere. So just because something isn't, necessarily dangerous for you, right, necessarily harmful at that moment, virulent, right, it doesn't mean that, don't think of it necessarily as something just lying in wait. It's infected you and it's hiding out. There are bacteria all over you. All inside of you. You have it's called the microbiome, right? So it is very normal to be, I don't even want to say infected, but to have, colonies of bacteria living in and on you, right? That's very normal. So don't take that as being like, oh, this is so horrible and bad. 20% of people with latent TB, that doesn't necessarily mean that 20% of people are taking time bombs. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah. So only a small proportion of people who get infected with TB will get TB disease and symptoms. And babies and kids are at higher risk because their immune systems are worse, I assume. And yeah, the symptoms of TB. So they usually come on gradually. What do you think some of the common symptoms are?
Well, definitely breathing related things.
Yeah.
So like coughing and blocked up throat and croaking and all those kind of things.
Yeah. So it says a cough that lasts more than 3 weeks. So coughing up, phlegm. Yeah, or mucus with blood in. That's that's the classic, like the lady coughs into a handkerchief.
Oh, yes.
And then she looks at it, and then she quickly stuffs it
Hides
away in her
it.
pocket. And she and her soon-to-be husband, or her husband, who's apparently going off to some war or whatnot, comes back, and he's like, "Are you okay, darling?" And she's like, "Oh, don't worry." And it's all that. And then she goes on some emotional journey, or she dies or something. I don't know, man. I'm not into period pieces, really. Like, it's Little Women, Pride and Prejudice, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, back to this. So more symptoms: feeling tired or exhausted. So exhaustion, really. Fatigue, high temperature. So fevers, night sweats, appetite loss, weight loss. It says feeling generally unwell. So if you're ill, like don't have the takeaway of this be if you're feeling ill. You probably have
tuberculosis.
TB.
No.
If you're coughing up sort of blood, and all of these other sorts of things, signs of TB. And it says as well that kids, it can affect kids' growth, and it can affect them putting on weight, because obviously children, an adult will probably lose weight, right? A child is supposed to be constantly putting on weight. They're supposed to be like just tacking on mass because they need to grow into an adult size. And so, yeah, it could affect kids gaining weight or growing. And bear in mind as well, we said TB is caused by bacteria. It depends on where that, it infects you. So it's most common to have it infect the lungs. I think consumption is specifically pulmonary. So with your pulmonary system, it's specific to that. That would be consumption, TB, but TB can infect pretty much any part of your body, right? It's just most common to be in the lungs. But if it's spread to another part of your body, like your lymph nodes or your bones, your brains, your brain. I forget that not everyone has two. You might have some other symptoms, says the NHS, like swollen glands, aches and pains, swollen joints or ankles, pelvic pain or tummy pain, constipation, dark or cloudy urine, headaches, vomiting, confusion, sort of foggy brain fog stuff, a stiff neck, and or a rash on the legs, face, or other parts of the body. So those are the symptoms. Diagnosis is apparently pretty straightforward. You can have an X-ray or ultrasound or echocardiogram or a CT scan of your chest or the part of your body that might be infected. Have a look at that. Taking samples of your mucus, which would be your phlegm. If you don't know what mucus is, it's kind of like snot. It's that basically the lubricant stuff inside your body. That's not necessarily just it's not just a lubricant. It's more
it like catches stuff
as well.
You blow it out.
Yeah. But also, I mean, there's mucosal membranes like all of your bods. Anyway, let's get a wee bit off track there. So you could also have a biopsy. So just taking a bit of you of some of your cells and being like, let's go have a look-see and see what's going on there. And if you've got no symptoms, but you're a high-risk person, so for example, someone who has TB has coughed on your face, you could go in and say, hello, someone with TB has coughed on my face. Can you check to see if I have been infected, please? And they can do that. There's this thing called a Mantoux test, I believe. It's French, Mantaux. So French people, tell me how terribly I have butchered your language, please. If it is French.
I would guess.
Manteau.
Like plateau.
It's EAU, plateau. This is OUX. I have no idea. French. I feel like French people are making it up on the fly, man. I don't know. They have a bunch of letters that they just don't pronounce. I'm not even going to wade into that one, you know. And you know what? The worst part is that this probably isn't even French. That's what someone's going to say. This isn't French, and I didn't look into it because I am a fool. No, so they basically will do. They can do blood tests or a Mantoux test. So that's a skin test where they basically just inject some stuff underneath your skin, and it will react if you've got TB. It basically like it'll sort of change color, sort of thing. I think, and you can just be like, oh, there you go, you've infected with TB because this liquid has reacted, right? So that is diagnosis. Let's talk a little bit about the cause and spread. As we said, caused by bacteria. It's M. tuberculosis, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, that causes TB. And gosh, this one is really interesting. It says it's an alcohol and acid fast bacillus. Don't need to worry about what that is at all, but people that know microorganisms will find that one a little bit interesting, I guess. I just don't want to explain it, honestly. I was thinking, I was like, I'll explain this, and I thought it is so pointless. Honestly, it's so pointless. It's about the structure of their walls and the shape of them and stuff like that. Honestly, don't worry about what it actually means. But what I do want to talk a little bit more about is sort of gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, because it's an interesting one. So it's a non-spore forming, non-motile, obligate aerobic, facultative, catalase negative intracellular bacteria. Do you want to try and break that one down?
Good God. What's the first word?
Non-spore forming. Okay,
so it doesn't release spores. That's not how it reproduces, by releasing spores.
Yeah. Well, bacteria will reproduce by mitosis. So it doesn't form spores, so it doesn't...
So all bacteria are non-spore forming, no. By my definition, which is wrong.
So a bacterial spore is just like a really dormant form that's kind of hardy. Like you know what a spore is, right? It's a spore is like a
seed.
The main thing to get across here with
its time.
Yeah, the main thing to get across here with a bacterial spore is that it's dormant and hardy, right?
Right.
So it's not necessarily a seed, because a seed's that look, it's a dormant and hardy. Don't worry about too much what it is.
It's like hibernating, and it's waiting for the right environment, and then it will go, I'm awake again.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay, that's yes.
Yeah. And it's not going to get destroyed whilst it's waiting.
Well, it's harder to destroy it whilst it's waiting.
So it's like a polar bear has gone into hibernation, and then
hibernate.
Okay, imagine a polar bear hibernates, which it might do. We'll see. And then or a bear, and then it's put on a suit of armor, and it's like thrown itself somewhere, and it's waiting for somewhere a little bit warm. So it floats around in its suit of armor, and then eventually it finds somewhere warm, and it goes, I'm awake again, and then wakes up and it eats some penguins.
Sure. Do you know what?
Yeah.
The only thing I'm going to pull you up on is, why would a polar bear want to go somewhere warm? We're warming it up already enough for them.
How do you think we got bears?
I'm going to move on. So, non-spore forming, got that one down. Non-motile, what does that mean?
Not very good at moving.
Yeah, so it doesn't have like
little legs.
Yeah, well, yeah, or like a flagellum, which would be like a thing like that it uses to. Yeah.
A little tail.
Although hold on, is a sperm technically a flagellum? Yeah, it's got a flagellum. Yeah, it is. Yeah,
well, I just accidentally bossed that.
No. I just wanted. Do you know what? Here's the thing, right? I wanted to double check that the structure on a sperm was called a flagellum, and it wasn't. It didn't have another technical specific name that I was unaware of. But no, you absolutely bossed that. Well done. Yeah. So it doesn't really move around on its own. Obligate aerobic.
Okay. So aerobic. Oh, it's something to do with air, like oxygen.
Yeah.
It has to use oxygen.
Yeah. So it'll be obligate aerobic is it has to use oxygen, so it's like in respiration. So like we would be
non-obligate, like we're both. We can use oxygen, we cannot use oxygen if we want to. We have really limited anaerobic respiration, but it builds up. Okay, so we're obligate aerobic in as humans, but inside our cells some non-aerobic stuff goes on.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, an obligate aerobe is an organism that requires oxygen to grow. We would be obligate aerobic.
Okay, fine.
I mean,
so I was talking about respiration, not what we're talking about.
Well, no, so yeah, but I mean, that is why we need oxygen to grow, because of respiration. We can do anaerobic respiration, but it results in, I think, lactic acid.
Yeah, it gets sore legs.
So yeah, and we can't. the thing is that we need it to grow. We can hold our breath for a bit and not immediately die.
Yeah.
But we can't survive without oxygen.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Nailed it.
Okay.
Cool.
Good,
Next
good.
one.
God.
Were you expecting this section to take this long?
No.
Well, I'm giving it a shot. We've gotten this far.
I'm going to skip the next two because we're not even going to get them. There's no point in even. It's gone too long. Intracellular bacteria. What do you think that means?
Intracellular bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
Does it mean that it like communicates with its friends? Like it intracellular? It talks to other cells?
Well, what does that prefix
Between.
mean? Between?
Yeah.
Intra. INTRA.
Oh. Does it not mean between?
No. So, intra means you're thinking of inter.
Inside, sorry.
Intra is, so intra is within, inter is between. This is why we study Latin in high school.
I did that. I just forgot it all. So inside, intracellular. So it's all inside of one cell? Everything's inside?
That's just bacteria.
Okay. Not if it's got a flagellum.
Well, yeah, but that is still part of the cell. Anyway, so it's not within. I feel like you're thinking about the bacteria itself, or bacterium itself. But you want to be thinking more about the environment that it's in.
Oh! It wants to be inside other cells. Like it wants to be inside a body.
Yes, exactly.
Great.
Yeah. So it can exist within cells. It exists like it lives within cells.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So it is a pretty interesting bacteria. It's a pretty interesting organism, but also it's got these lipids. You know what lipids are?
No, I can't remember.
Fats, basically.
Oh, okay.
Just fats. Just think of them as fats. That's the most simple way. Little fat,
like
sort
a
of
camel.
molecules. What?
I said like a camel.
Yes. Okay. You are throwing just random things at, and they do make sense.
I've always thought of camels as lipid.
Oh my God! Look,
having lipids. Sorry.
We all have lipid. Look, we all have lipid. Right. I'm going to just continue on.
Yeah.
And I'm going to slightly ignore you. So
I'll keep throwing things at you.
Basically, this cell wall that they have means that they are resistant to quite a few antibiotics. And we'll get into why that is in a sec. And they can survive in extreme conditions like extreme acidity or alkalinity. So alkalinity is the opposite of acidity, right? So it's basic as opposed to acidic. So do you know any bases? No, don't make a joke. Answer the question.
As in things that are alkaline?
Yeah.
God. No. There must be one.
Yeah, no, it's honestly, we know more acids, right, than we know bases generally. People, vinegar, citric acid, these like as in sort of lemon juice, those are all acidic. But sodium bicarbonate would usually be sort of described as a base because it's a weak base in solution, but in aqueous solution, but it's technically not a base. It's amphoteric because it can act as an acid or a base.
That's exactly why I didn't say it, Corey.
But it's not,
because it's like, amphoteric.
It's really honestly kind of just like a trick, like a sort of technicality there.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean the most common base that you'll probably come across is sodium bicarbonate, probably, right? I mean, if you think about it, if you mix vinegar with something and it froths up, like that, that volcano stuff, that's an acid and a base reaction.
So Mentos are bases. Because you stick them in Coca-Cola, which I presume is acidic.
No. So I think the Mentos and Coke thing is... God, this is...
I'm so sorry.
No, it's not your fault. It's just my fault for reading into stuff. I'm pretty sure that this is because there's lots of tiny little imperfections on the surface of Mentos, which provide, I think... Is it nucleation sites? Basically, it provides a lot of surface area for the carbon dioxide to come out of solution in the Coke. So there's carbon dioxide dissolved in your Coca-Cola, which is what makes it fizzy. And so when it sort of touches a Mento, there's lots of little bumps and little imperfections there, which provide perfect points for that carbon dioxide to come out of solution. And what that means is that it's coming out of solution, you've got lots of bubbles, and so it just froths up and goes everywhere.
Cool. So if I wanted Coca-Cola but I didn't want it to be fizzy, could I drop a Mento in it, gets rid of all the carbon dioxide, and then I'd have still Coke? Yeah,
you could also just leave it for a bit. The carbon dioxide.
If I'm in a rush, but I've got a packet of Mentos with me. You're so
Look. I get it. You're living in the rat race. You're living in this fast-paced world, right? But back in my day, right? Back when I was a whippersnapper,
You just sat next to a bottle of Coke, waiting for it to go still.
Exactly. We didn't have the luxury of popping a couple Mentos in our Coke. You know, we enjoyed watching our Coke go still. We didn't have social media, did we? We weren't watching the YouTubes, huh? We weren't there listening to podcasts. We had the original podcast, radio. Listen to the radio, watch a lovely bottle of Coke go flat. That's what we did. And you know what? I think it was a better time, Luke.
Very good.
This is about TB.
Yeah. How have we got so far off track? It's mostly my fault.
Okay, so back to tuberculosis, right? I was saying that it's resistant to antibiotics, a lot of antibiotics, and I said I was going to get to that later, but I'll just quickly do it now, right? The reason that it's resistant to a lot of antibiotics is probably because of its weird little cell wall. So bacteria can have these sort of cell walls made up of peptidoglycan and some other things sometimes. Don't worry about what any of that is. There's no point in me saying it, actually, because I'm not going to delve into it. But what I mean to say is that these sort of specific properties of this bacterial cell wall means that it's resistant to some antibiotics, because antibiotics, what they need to do is attack bacteria and not attack other things, right? So for example, fungi might produce antibiotics to keep, bacteria away. Some apparently honey can have antibacterial properties as well. And the issue is, right, bacteria, they're cells. We're cells. Killing them and killing us, it's easy to find something that does both. I mean, it's not hard to find something that does both. I mean, for example, right, think about if you have a rat problem, right? You want to use some rat poison. Now, you don't want to give little Timmy, your son, some rat poison, because rat poison is also people poison if you have enough of it, right? And and that's same with pesticides, right? Pesticides are also people poison. It just so happens that bugs are very little, and so we can use, sort of an amount of pesticide that doesn't then become harmful to us, except for when we accidentally do use pesticide that is very harmful to us and causes lots of problems. There are I'm simplifying pesticides, but the point is that the issue when it comes to sort of dealing with bacteria or any sort of infection sort of like that, you want to find something that kills the thing that you want to kill without killing you. That's the whole problem with cancer, by the way. You're trying to kill human cells without killing the healthy human cells. And so what you do is essentially shoot radiation at it, or use chemo, which essentially attacks, chemo will attack sort of fast reproducing cells. These sort of things affect fast reproducing cells the most, right? So that means that the cancer cells, which are replicating quickly, they end up being taken out, but then so do your hair follicles, because they're also quickly they also are rapid sort of reproducing cells. Same with sort of bone marrow, that also produces has a sort of quick overturn of cells. So it's a similar problem to the sort of cancer problem there. We need to find something that hits what we want to hit without hitting everything else, right? And so what we do is if we look at bacteria, a sort of unique feature that they have are those peptidoglycan sort of cell walls. Bacteria are kind of varied, right? But there are sort of structures within bacteria or structures on the exterior of bacteria that are necessary to their survival that plant cells, animal cells, even fungal cells don't necessarily have, right? And so if you target that, then you can pretty specifically target just bacteria. That's why when you have antibiotics, you don't die. You just get a sore tummy because it's affecting your microbiome. It's not affecting your cells, because funnily enough, your human cells aren't bacterial cells. Crazy. But this cell wall is a little bit different, right? So in tuberculosis, it's a little bit different, which makes it resistant to antibiotics. It means it's difficult to stain with a gram stain, which is something that we use to sort of stain bacteria. We actually use it. You call bacteria gram positive or gram negative, basically based on how they react to this stain. It's a way of sort of determining, to put it very, very simply, the sort of broad structure of their cell wall. We can split it into two kind of categories, and we call that gram positive and gram negative. It's really difficult to stain it with a gram stain, which is like just one of the most basic things when it comes to bacteria. And on top of that, as I said, it can survive extreme conditions like lots of acid or lots of alkaline, low oxygen, and it can survive within cells. What is perhaps a problem with a bacteria? For us, what's a problem with a bacteria that can survive within a cell?
Well, that we need to kill the cell to get to it.
So what I mean more is, what is, like, if we look at our immune system, what are the two main ways that our immune system deals with stuff?
So, like, well, the main one I know about is that, like, things float around in your blood and they kind of lock onto the exterior of things. Mm-hmm. Whereas, on the exterior, like the wall out on the outside of something. Whereas if you're inside one of my cells, I can't lock onto something because you're inside my cell. That is
true. That is absolutely, I think, actually slightly more advanced than the answer I was looking for.
Well, you're so welcome.
The sort of the first line of defense, let's say, with the immune system, right? And again, we're sort of anthropomorphizing and we're kind of simplifying here, but your sort of basic one, your dumb immune system, right? You've got your smart immune system, let's say, that's the sort of antibodies that you produce, which are specific, right? And then you've got these other cells called macrophages, and what they do, do you know what phage means? That suffix?
No.
Means to eat.
Right.
So macrophages are just cells that they
chomp, they absorb, don't they? They just like absorb the thing.
Yeah, basically. So a macrophage will come along, and it kind of like a Pac-Man situation, right? It will kind of go. There'll be sort of something that your body doesn't want to be in there. The macrophage will just kind of glom over it and like absorb it into itself. Or not necessarily absorb, but bring it into itself, and then just digest it with digestive enzymes. But if it's able to, if this bacteria is able to survive within cells,
even if you eat the cell, it can survive inside of that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly. So it can be resistant to macrophages is the issue there. And so that is like kind of a problem. And so there is another stain. Because it doesn't do well with the Gram stain. There is a stain that is used to diagnose TB. It's called the Zeal-Nielsen stain. It's you don't really need to know much about it, but it's pink. It's a pink stain. It's decolorized with acid alcohol, and then it's counterstained with another stain, which is usually kind of blue. So if it's TB, it kind of turns pink. It kind of stays pink, and if it's not, then it won't. Right, so we use like this little pink dye essentially to sort of diagnose TB.
Where are you putting that dye?
Well, is
that in the blood like the other one?
Oh, well, okay. So I didn't actually look into this. Right, I would. It wasn't the blood, by the way. It was under the skin for the other one. Sorry. But this, if you were doing this in a lab, you would be doing it.
So you're doing this on like the biopsy you did.
Yeah, probably you would do this on the biopsy.
You're taking the cells out of the body.
I would assume, yes. Right? But again, I did biotechnology, so everything I did was in a lab. None of it was in a people. And yeah, so if we talk about the spread, right? So we understand what causes it. It's the bacteria. It's M. tuberculosis, right? And that's what causes it. And how does it spread? Do you know how it spreads?
Well, again, it probably depends on where it's infected in the person you're receiving it from, but probably mostly through coughing.
Yeah, so it's coughing. It's coughing these sort of small droplets with the bacteria in, and you can catch TB, it says, if you regularly breathe in these droplets over a long period of time. And again, you can have latent TB, and so you don't get ill or have any symptoms, and you can't spread that to other people. That's just not, it just doesn't happen. But it can turn into active TB in the future. So again, I didn't look into this super closely because this wasn't supposed to be the focus of the episode, but I'm going to hazard a guess here based on just generally what I know about bacteria. So you probably have a virulent and non-virulent sort of form. So you can have basically the same strain of bacteria, right? So think of it as the same species of bacteria, right? And it can be non-virulent, but then it can become virulent through some factors, right? Through some change within the bacteria, it can go from being like not a problem to a problem, right? So it's not going to spread unless it is like it's got that maybe that little sort of switch flipped in it where it's like, ooh, I'm bad now, I'm gonna spread. ling-ling-ling. Is that the ad bell?
I hope so. We don't have any other bells in this room.
Well, I'll tell you what we don't have in this room, Luke. We don't have people who have subscribed to SCI Guys on YouTube and followed us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
I actually have done all those things.
I have too. But why don't we tell people about why specifically that is a very cool and interesting thing for them to do?
Well, we want to be everywhere with you all the time. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, we want to be there with you. If you're on Spotify, we want to be there with you. And if you're on YouTube, we want to be there with you. And you probably want us to be there with you too.
Even if you prefer to listen on Spotify and don't really watch us on YouTube all that much, it really helps if you subscribe on every single platform because it gets us in front of more people, which means it makes it easier to make this show, which you love, right? You love it. You love us, right?
Give me love. Validate my soul.
Subscribe to SCI Guys on YouTube and follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify right now.
Heal the deep, deep chasm in my heart.
Let's get back to the show. You can't pass on TB if you've got latent TB. It's only if you've got sort of active TB with the sort of symptoms and whatnot.
But crucially, you've caught that latent TB from somebody with active TB.
Yes.
All I'm getting at is that we've made the distinction where like somebody with dormant TB can't pass it on. So they're not even passing on like dormant TB to other people. They're not passing on anything. So if you're catching dormant TB, it's from this some kind of source in a similar way to how you'd catch active TB.
Yeah, so basically how this works is, let's say someone with TB coughs on you, with active TB coughs on you, right? The TB bacteria get into your body, right? Now, if you've got a good immune system, probably just fight it off. You clear it all from your body. If you can't clear it all from your body, your immune system will probably then just force it into that sort of like non-dangerous state. And so it has been active, but now it is not because your immune system's kind of making sure that it isn't, right? So yeah, you only really get latent TB from active TB. But I'm sure there may be some weird edge case that someone's going to tell me about in the comments, which is why I'm always so terrified of saying anything definitive, because biology, man, it gives you trust issues. So we've already spoken about sort of the symptoms, right? You know, and obviously coughing is one of the top ones there, right? So coughing is basically the big way to sort of pass this on, right? And I want to be clear, it's said that TB is not spread by shaking someone's hand, sharing food or drink, touching bed linens or toilet seats, sharing toothbrushes, or even kissing, apparently. But which seems weird, right? But if you think about it, kissing is, if we were to kiss now, Luke, right?
Yep.
Right. We may be kissing, we may be sharing our saliva, right? But if your lungs are infected, you're not coughing up droplets of mucus into my mouth as we kiss, because I'm not really into that, despite the fact that you keep on begging for it every single time. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Don't kink shame.
So when you breathe in TB, they can get into the lungs and start to grow. Obviously, your immune system can sort of fight that off. And then it can move through the blood to the other parts of the body. If your immune system hasn't fought it off, it could go to the kidney, spine, brain. It can be infectious if it's in the lungs or the throat. Right? I think it's probably it's not as infectious if it's elsewhere in the body. Right? Because if you think about it, it infects people by sort of being passed on through those droplets in the air that you sort of cough out. Your kidney doesn't really have a direct access to the air, so it shouldn't, at least. So it's those forms of TB are not usually infectious, and you're more likely to spread TB to someone that you spend more time with. You see them every day or whatnot. So you and I, we don't see each other every day, so we'd be less likely to spread it to each other. But you and your wife,
why we should start kissing.
No, Luke, stop it. But you and your wife could spread.
She's getting all my TB.
Goodness me, Luke. It says family members, friends, co-workers, schoolmates. And then obviously risk factors. We've said diabetes, weakened immune system, malnourishment, tobacco use, but also spending time with someone that has TB. If you're born or lived in an area where TB is more common, if you're under the age of 5, if you live in overcrowded or unhealthy conditions, if you drink alcohol or take drugs, if you had TB before and it wasn't treated properly as well. All of these things are risk factors for TB. And then treatment is pretty straightforward. It's just antibiotics. We've also got a vaccine called the BCG vaccine. They give it to people that are at higher risk. It's recommended to be given to people that are at higher risk for it. And as I said, treated with antibiotics. And I can give you the list of them: isoniazid, rifampin, pyrazinamide, zimide, ethambutol, streptomycin. Oh, I know that one.
Oh, yeah. I've had a bit of streptomycin before.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, so those antibiotics are the most common ones used. But crucially, and this is very important, those need to be taken daily for 4 to 6 months to be effective.
That's a long time.
Well, you've got to be sure, right? And it's super dangerous, as with all antibiotics, to not take the full course or to take it without without a doctor's advice or whatnot, because antibiotic resistance is a thing. So let's just quickly go through what antibiotic resistance is.
God, you've set them off now.
I've set myself off. You got a bunch of bacteria. Let's say we've got my 5 fingers are 5 different individual little bacterium. Bacteria? I hate words that are plural like that. Anyway, I've got 5 bacteria, right? They're all the same strain. They're all from the same colony. They're all sisters, mothers, daughters, friends, whatnots, right? Now, some antibiotics come in and boom, they knock out 2. Okay, right, they've knocked out 2. They've knocked out 2, right? Okay, well, we do the next few days. Oh, another one's knocked out. Oh, we're down to this last one. Haha, you're basically all gone there, you bloody bacteria. And it's maybe getting a little bit resistant to it, right? This is the most resistant one to the antibiotics, obviously, because it's lasted the longest. And now that almost all of them are gone, you don't really feel ill anymore.
Yeah, I'm going to stop taking my antibiotics now.
Well, I don't want to take. They're making the antibiotics make my tummy a little bit funny, and I don't have the symptoms anymore, so I'll stop taking them. But what's going to happen is that this one bacterium that's left, do you know what they do? They can divide. So this bacterium that is resistant that's the most resistant to these antibiotics that you've been throwing at it because it's survived the longest, will now divide. Boop, you've got 2. And do you know what those 2 are going to do? Boop, they'll divide. They've got 4. And then boop, 8. And then cascades down that way. And suddenly you've now got a colony of tuberculosis, Mycobacterium tuberculosis in your body, which is resistant to these antibiotics because the way that bacteria work is not like, the way that humans or animals work. They don't create offspring by getting 2 individuals and sharing DNA, between them, having a 50-50 split and, making offspring like that. Bacteria are just like, okay, I'll split, and here is you with all of my DNA, and here is me with all of my DNA. We're basically perfect copies, save for a few little errors and mutations here and there. And also, bacteria have this ability to share DNA, laterally.
It's freaky.
It's crazy, right? So one bacterium can share DNA with another without having to produce an offspring. So they'll just be like, hey, I've got this cool gene. Do you want this cool gene? And this one's like, yeah, okay. Boop, there you go. And it's more complex than that, and it's not a universal thing that's that simple, but that is a thing that is possible with bacteria. So what will then happen there is if you don't get rid of, enough of it that your immune system can then sort of clear out the rest and make it not a problem anymore, what you've then done is just created a smaller colony that's going to grow and grow and grow again and be resistant to the antibiotic that you just used to get it down to that point. So now you can't use your streptomycin, so you've got to maybe use ethambutol, right? You've got to use a different antibiotic to try and get at it. And if you don't do that properly, then that becomes resistant to that. And if it becomes resistant to multiple antibiotics, then you're screwed, right? Because now what do? We don't have unlimited antibiotics, right? It's not like it's just easy to find a poison, essentially, that works only on bacteria and on nothing else. So it becomes really difficult. So we actually have a name, as I've mentioned earlier, for TB that is resistant to multiple drugs. It's multi-drug resistant TB.
Yeah, you mentioned that at the top.
I did. And it's a very inventive name, I think. So if you don't use, obviously, TB medicines properly, then you can, as I've said, you can get multi-drug resistant TB. And it is so not good. So it's caused by bacteria that don't respond to isoniazid and rifampicin. I hate antibiotic names. Just make them easy. Just make them easy for me. Corey. Those 2 are the most effective TB drugs. If it's resistant to that, that is multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. It's treatable and curable using second-line drugs, but the second-line treatment options require extensive medicines that are expensive and toxic, it says. So yeah, they cost more money and they're not good for you. Because as I said, trying to find a really specific thing that only affects bacteria is difficult, and it's going to be like if it doesn't work on if these first 2 don't work, then the other options are not as good. They're less preferable. And then more extensive drug resistance can develop as well in some cases. So if you don't respond to the most effective second-line TB drugs, then you have not many options, right? If you're just basically basically it's coming about that like, oh, you throw this at it, it's like, I'm fine. You throw that at it, I'm fine. You're going to run out of things to throw at it very soon. And essentially, like this is a really big problem for us in general, not just with TB, but in general. Misapplication of antibiotics, overprescribing of antibiotics, not taking the full course of antibiotics. And you might be asking, well, why is overusing antibiotics? Surely you've said, Corey, that I've got to do my full course. Why would using lots of antibiotics be bad? Well, here's the thing. Remember how I said that you have little mistakes, little errors, little mutations sometimes when the bacteria split? What those mutations can do is cause resistance. So that's why that bacteria might have been resistant in the first place. And if you overuse antibiotics, so if you use antibiotics for any bacterial infection ever, all the time, when your body could probably clear it out by itself, what you're going to do is you're really... Think about it, it's sort of artificial selection. You're then selecting for bacteria that are resistant to these drugs. So you're going to be like basically pressuring these bacteria to become resistant to these drugs that you're using to kill them unnecessarily, right? Because if you don't need to use the drug in the first place, there's no point in sort of risking that you're going to create a more resistant strain of bacteria. It's a constant arms race that we're in right now. And it is bloody scary. But yeah, I mean, apparently it says here that in the past, multi-drug resistant TB treatment used to last for at least 9 months and up to 20 months. And the World Health Organization expanded access to all oral regimens. But yeah, I mean, there's a 6-month regimen now, which is it says it's a treatment of choice for eligible patients. It's a shorter duration, lower pill burden, and high efficacy of this novel regimen can help ease the burden on health systems and save precious resources to further expand the diagnostic and treatment coverage of all individuals in need. And you think, yeah, 20 months, that's a long time to be taking drugs and not feeling great and all that sort of stuff. But also, you got to think about that. It's also a cost there for society because of the burden on our healthcare systems, because that's not someone who is taking antibiotics and finish them in 4 to 6 months. That's someone who for over a year and a half is having to get appointments and get prescriptions and whatnot. And it's a little thing, but that sort of stuff adds up. And I'm not saying that we should, that it's a bad thing that people that need to use healthcare. My point is that if we want to limit the number of people that are using our healthcare system, we want to limit that, right? So that we can maximize our output for it. And I don't say limit that by saying, you shouldn't be using it because I don't like you. What I mean is... take
steps to mean that we don't have to use so much healthcare all the time.
Bingo. Spot
preventative, on. Ideally, a lot of the time. Or alternative drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And... speaking of drugs,
yes,
we are now getting to the whole point of this episode. So before we get into it, I just want to ask you, Luke, do you know what a patent is?
So yes, a patent is sort of a legal, I guess like a legal document, a legal grant, where a government says, right, you've invented this thing, you've discovered this thing, or you've invented this thing, you've done a bunch of work and spent a bunch of money to, theoretically, done a bunch of work and spent a bunch of money to discover it, and we're going to give you a period of time where nobody else is allowed to make it without licensing it from you.
So I'm going to be a real
pedant,
pernickety, and I have to be, because this patent stuff is like, dude, I did some of it in uni, and it's so much, right? Getting a patent isn't as easy as just saying, hey, I found a new thing. There you go, it's mine now. There are different criteria, and it costs money, and it's a long process. And I want to pick up a thing there you said, because you said discover. And that is pretty objectively wrong when it comes to patents, because we'll go through the 4 basic requirements for patentability. But and it's not your fault, by the way. Like, you've not done anything wrong. But the word discover there, I know what you meant, but the word discover there is quite specifically used in sort of these this sort of patent information stuff as something that isn't patentable, just a discovery. Okay, so we'll get to it, right? So there are 4 requirements for patentability, right? There needs to be an invention belonging to any field of technology. The invention must be susceptible of industrial application. The invention must be new or novel, and the invention must involve an inventive step. Now, what this means is that you can't just happen across something, right? For example, I can't just happen across penicillin and say, I own penicillin. I found a mold that makes penicillin.
So it's the process of getting penicillin.
Yes. You can patent a process. You can't patent like penicillin if it's produced naturally, right? Because you've just discovered it. So you can't just discover something and say, I want to patent it. You need to first have an invention. You need to make something, and it needs to be in any sort of technological field. So it can't be an art piece. You can't patent an art piece or a design, like a sort of aesthetic design. You can't patent any of that because that's not patentable, because it's not an invention belonging to any field of technology. You can, however, patent, so you can't patent, how do we put it? You wouldn't be able to patent, say, like a color. But if you have a particular process for making a pigment of this color, and there's no other way to make this color, you can patent the process for making the pigment, right? So there's got to be an invention, right? It must be susceptible to an industrial application. Very relatively straightforward. It's got to be bloody useful, right? It's got to be useful in some industry. So agriculture, or the healthcare industry, anything like that. If you invent something and they're like, oh cool, so what is the purpose of this double wheel contraption you've made? And you say, I don't know, it looks cool though. Useless. No point in patenting that. That's a waste of everyone's time. Like, why would you patent that when it's got no use to anyone anywhere? You've made an invention, sure, but it's not useful to anyone, so forget about it. Doesn't matter, right?
I think we should let people patent things anyway. And then just if they're useless, then that's fine. You just pay the patent fee.
But then they own
give that money to the NHS.
But then they own that useless thing.
Yeah. If it's useless, then why would anyone want it?
But then that useless thing on its own might become not useless if it's if you patent that process, then no one else is able to make that thing, and that thing may be useless on its own, but used, yeah. No, there's a reason for all of this,
sure.
Right? It seems I know. It's annoying. I spent like almost an entire module on this, Luke, so I am getting to talk all the way through this, whether anyone likes it or not.
I just mean, like, if someone writes a script and it's crap, you can still let someone copyright it. Just take their copyright money and just go, thank you, I'll protect your crap script that no one wants.
Yeah, but then what if it's a really crap script, but it's got a decent idea in there? And, like M. Night Shyamalan's Old. Who's going to make a movie about Old now that he did it? And it wasn't, it was very good, M. Night. When you overheard me saying it was bad, probably, that wasn't true. I didn't realize he was within earshot, and I don't know whether he heard it, but he very well could have, so I'm just going to... Let's move on. So, so we've already said it's got to be an invention, it's got to be useful, essentially it's got to be susceptible to industrial application, it's got to be useful for something, right? It's got to be novel, new. Now that's important. What that means is that it can't be sort of, it can't just be another thing. You can't just like sort of have patented something before and then patent sort of the same thing again. It's got to be novel, right? It has to be a new concept, not a concept that's already been made by someone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
prior art, that's called, I believe.
Yeah, right. And this is
maybe not in drugs though.
No, this patent stuff is like difficult, right? And copyright and patenting are different things, right? Copyright means that like no one else is allowed to use your sort of thing, like you own that thing. So if you've got copyright on say Iron Man, right? If I were to start selling Iron Man comics, you could sue me because that you are the only one, you have the exclusive right to make and sell Iron Man like comics.
Do I? Fantastic.
No, don't do it. Don't do it. Kevin Feige will be breathing right down your neck, or whoever it is that's running Marvel Comics right now.
Bob Iger's going to come for me.
Jesus Christ, that's the last thing you want. This stuff is kind of convoluted and whatnot, so I would definitely recommend reading into it yourself. We're not going to be able to, we'd probably have to do a whole episode on patenting if we want to really dig into the nitty gritty of it. And then also the invention must involve an inventive step, so it can't be obvious, right? So if you've got someone that's knowledgeable in the field and you show it to them and they're like, no, this is obvious. Yeah, this is obvious. Like of course, this is like, it's like ABC, right? It's like obviously ABC, right? But if it's got an inventive step, it can't be, you can't just sort of have an understanding of the field and immediately just go to that. It's got to be like a sort of non-obvious thing. You've got to have like figured something out that is maybe bringing together information that isn't just sort of already laid out, right? Does that make sense to you? Yeah. So it's got to, basically it's got to be an invention susceptible of industrial. It's got to be an invention. It's got to be useful. It's got to be new, like a novel idea, and it's got to have an inventive step. Now people think that invention and inventive step are the same thing. It's absolutely not. You can invent something that doesn't have an inventive step, right? Like
a bicycle with 3 wheels.
Sure, yeah.
It's not an inventive step.
Yeah.
Adding one more wheel?
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Exactly.
That took no skill.
Yeah, exactly. And there's nothing. Yeah, exactly. There you go. So a bicycle with a third wheel would probably not be patentable, right? It probably wouldn't be.
But I'm going to try.
Go for it. But there you go. And so we're going to talk about Johnson & Johnson because they have a patent on a life-saving medicine for drug-resistant TB. And do you know what they did with it?
Well, the analogy I've heard from Sir John Green, not a sir, but I'm giving him a surname because he did a good thing.
He's got a surname, it's Green.
It's Green, but a sir. Okay, Sir John Green, the analogy he gave was essentially it's like inventing a pen cap for a pen. So they had this drug, which was like a pen, and then their patent on that pen was running out. So they went, we have now invented a little lid for the pen, and now the entire thing is patented once more. And everyone went, no.
Yeah,
that's not an inventive step.
Yeah, so basically what's going on here is the patents run out. That's the key thing about patents. Patents aren't like copyrights after Mickey Mouse or Walt Disney. Basically, by the way, copyright used to only last until I think it was the death of the author, and then it was like the death of the creator. Then it was the death of the creator plus like 30 years, and then it's just been constantly extended by Disney because they don't want to lose the rights to Mickey Mouse, because if they do that, their entire empire.
Look what happened to Winnie the Pooh.
Nothing.
Well, yeah, but we got that horror movie out of it.
Oh yeah, I still haven't seen that. I know someone that was in that.
I know someone who was offered the part in the second one.
I know someone that was offered the part in the second one, do I?
She has not taken it.
Oh, okay, never mind. No, I know someone that was in the first one. But yeah, no, it was, like, that's the thing. Like, copyright can run out, but Mickey Mouse, like, Disney is basically single-handedly just pressuring governments to constantly update copyright law so that Mickey Mouse stays theirs forever. It's like, oh, Mickey Mouse is about to go out of copyright. Hey, government, maybe copyright law, maybe we should change it so that it's the death of the creator plus 70 years, plus 100 years, plus 120 years, right? Yeah, I think that makes sense. That makes sense. That's just us thinking that. There's no reason. Just for the benefit of everyone, you know? Patents, thank goodness, are not like that. Patent does not give you exclusive rights to use your invention or use your process, create and sort of market your process forever. What it does is it means that once that patent is filed, no one else is allowed to legally sort of create your thing or use your process, right? That gives you time to do the thing and make your money from it, basically, right? And then the patent runs out, and then it's free, it's free for anyone to use. Like anyone, like the thing with patents as well is that to get a patent, you need to make that process public. So, if you're going to patent something, necessarily everyone is going to know how you're doing that thing.
And that is kind of the great thing about patent legislation.
Oh, they're beautiful.
Is that it forces you to tell everyone what you're doing, and in return for telling everyone what you're doing, you get a period of time. I think in the UK it's 20 years for drug creation, but that includes the trial period. So which
lasts like a decade.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a friend who works for Pfizer who's always talking about the fact that, like, in the UK at least, I don't know about the rest of the world, they come up with a new drug, it takes them 10 years to get approval for it, and then they only have 10 years left to make all the money back for not only all the money they spent developing it, plus all the time that it's been, because you got an interest rate as well, but also all the money back on all the ones that failed as well, because there's a bunch of R&D costs for things that go nowhere.
Oh, most of them go nowhere.
Yeah,
that's why it's such a long process, and like there's so many sort of checks and balances there. Because of safety, obviously because of safety. Well, safety, after the thalidomide thing that went on, safety was a big thing there. But a lot of it is because it's sunk cost, right? If you want to make sure that the thing is working, because otherwise you spent your money on something that is just useless, right? And it costs a lot, and it does take a long time, as you said, because there are so many steps before you even get to human trials, and that's just thinking about the trialing it on people. People don't even think about the production of it. You've got to go from a pilot scale, like as in a small reactor that could, maybe one that could probably fit in this room, right? Up to an industrial scale, which is industrial. Look at a beer, look at a beer, what they call it, brewery. Look at the big tanks they've got for that.
Yep.
Like that. perhaps even bigger.
Well, and it has to be like 100% pure, and you have to transport it around the world.
Yeah.
And if you mess it up, it's not like messing up a bottle of beer, it's messing up a drug that you're putting in someone's body.
Oh, dude, beer, I mean, okay, the drugs are harder because to purify them.
Sure.
But beer still as well is like, like those processes are relatively like, there's like, they're all biotechnology, right? They're so similar. And like, you're so right. It's like beer on steroids, which sounds pretty good actually. Anyway, but no, you're so right. It's like, it's gotta be a certain level of purity. And like, yeah, you say making a bad batch of beer, you're still screwed if you make a bad batch of beer.
Sure, yeah.
If you make a bad batch of drug, like people can die, especially if you just don't filter out biological material enough. It's a lot, right? So yeah, patents are great because it's essentially sort of saying, look, it's in the common interest for everyone to have access to this, but we know that you're not going to do that. So here's a deal. Like you get some and everyone benefits. And much like Mickey Mouse and Disney, I'm not going to slander Mickey Mouse here. I'm going to slander Disney specifically. Mickey Mouse has done no wrong except for the blackface multiple times and the blackface that is still inherent in his character design. Look it up.
Yeah, there's some great video essays on that on YouTube.
Oh, yeah. Oh. So, you know, what they're essentially trying to do here is extend the patent by making a new patent that is only slightly different, which would mean that you can't then make a generic of this product because the patent's essentially been extended, right? Mm-hmm. And it means that, and when people started putting pressure on them, they very quickly announced the deal that they'd made with some countries, some like middle and low income countries, which, if you remember, the ones that are most affected by TB, and this is a very effective drug for drug resistant TB. They made a deal with some of them wherein, okay, so we're not going to enforce our patent. You can produce it. But that's not in all countries. I think in Russia, they have a deal with a company that has sort of exclusive rights to create and produce that. So the issue with that is, right, once you make a generic, suddenly it's applicable to, it's sort of at the whim of market forces, right? So it's the difference between a monopoly and like a sort of free market. So what?
Which, as we all know, leads to a utopia.
Shut up. I'm sick of this. Basically, when you've got a patent, you've got a monopoly, right? No one else is able to make that thing. So, you know, what are you going to do? Are you going to sell the drug, this life-saving drug, for like a low price, an affordable price, so that many people can have access to this necessary medication, that could prevent up to 1.6 million deaths per year? Or do you make them pay through the fucking nose? And you just jack the price up as high as you bloody want to make all your money back and then more, so that, you know, people that absolutely need this drug, you know, have to pay for it. And when I say people that have to pay for it, I mean the governments will have to pay for it in places with public health care, but that means that they are going to limit the use of it as much as possible because it's bloody expensive.
And also added on to that, like, you know, the argument around this patent stuff is that in the long term, it's a great thing because you publish your findings publicly, and in the long term, that's going to be a free thing, and you get a monopoly for a certain period. But in the long term, that's great, and like there will be the side effect of that, and it's not a good side effect, but the side effect of that is there'll be a period where there are genuinely people who could be saved who are not saved. But the logic or the argument goes something like, but in the long term, loads of people will be saved when it's made public and free, right? But that only works if you don't have companies trying to abuse the system and extend that monopoly period, which is exactly what happened here. That logic falls down if these companies are constantly going to act on their, you know, free market capitalist intention, which in our system is their right to do. But they're going to just game the system and have it be a monopoly for as long as they possibly can. You don't get, you know, there's no give and take there. There's just all take. Yeah,
absolutely. And, you know, people will say, well, but you can't expect governments to be able to fund this kind of stuff. It can only be done by private companies. Yeah, and the system that we've got now, sure. Like, all of this sort of stuff, like, one could conceive of a system wherein private companies are not solely responsible for producing the life-saving drugs that we need. And once they do produce them, they don't get to, I'm sorry, but like, this is, you're not stealing from a company. It's not like the company created this process. There were scientists, there were engineers that created this process that get paid their paycheck and that's it. And then who's benefiting from it? Not the people that created the process necessarily, right? It's the people that own the company that these people work for, because the company owns what you create for while you're working for the company. So it's not even like we're taking art from the artist. It's already been taken from the artists and being given to the corporation, who is just making people pay through the nose to not die. Like, they don't care. And ultimately, that's not very good, right?
And as well, as I understand it, in the case of tuberculosis here, there was some government funding as well.
Yeah,
it wasn't all just.
There is obviously there's government funding with these. The World Health, there is funding for big things like this, like HIV and stuff as well, right? There is funding that comes in from it. So yeah, it's not just you're right. It's not just like a private company just doing it of their own accord. But still, my point is more so that ultimately, like, it's really, really messed up that we live in a world where we're okay with millions and millions of people dying just so some people can make a lot of money. That's like explicitly what is happening here. I mean, we can say that it's horrible that they're trying to extend the patent, but the fact that they had that amount of time to let people die is bad enough in and of itself, right? Like, it's a complex issue only because of the system that we live in. But ultimately, what's resulted of this is that even though they've made this deal that they apparently had for a while and they rushed it out, there's maybe some inconsistencies there or just discrepancies as to all of that. But apparently they had this deal in place already and they rushed it out because people like John Green were putting pressure on them online. But ultimately, if no one was putting pressure on them, they would just extend the patents unfairly, technically, legally, through a loophole, right?
Yeah, and the really crucial thing about that is that means that this is the one case of this that we heard of. There will be cases like this all the time where companies are acting in their own selfish, profit-maximizing interests, which is exactly by design. That's what they're supposed to do. Yeah. Where, because they're not publicly facing companies, we never hear about it, or because they manage to obfuscate it, we never hear about it.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's this one victory here, one time, just goes to show how much of a mess there must be in the underbelly of all the times we don't hear about this.
Yeah, no, this is the tip of the iceberg, really, is kind of what we want to get across here. But yeah, you got to think of it this way, wherein the cost would drop with generics, right? Because suddenly there's competition and you want yours to be the one that's selling, and so you're going to make more money if you're selling more, so you drop the prices lower and lower and lower and lower, and then we get, fairish prices, especially for these drugs that you have to take for months and months on end. And like, look up the actual price drops, because they are insane. Honestly, like, it was estimated that it could go down to under $10 a month, and right now it is a lot more than that per month. Like, I think that even the sort of best-ish sort of price that is kind of being thought of right now is like $45 a month, right?
Which might not seem much like for life-saving treatment in the Western world, but if you're not in the Western world, that is like not necessarily not in the Western, but if you're in some areas of the world where like you're on the poverty line is something like $1.80 a day or something.
Oh yeah.
For everything.
So that's the GDF, the Global Drug Facility, for the Stop TB Partnership, which is affiliated with the United Nations. They basically buy TB drugs and make them available at affordable prices. So the affordable price that was basically sort of supplemented by the Global Drug Facility was like $45 a month, right? And you're not necessarily going to get that, because there are countries that don't have a GDF deal, like Indonesia, South Africa. They don't have a deal with a GDF. So you're not going to get it for that cheap price, right? You could be getting it for you could be getting it for way more, whatever it is that, the people that the companies that are selling it in your country want to sell it for. And yeah, it was estimated that the generic could go down to like, I think $8 to $17 a month, right? Based on the price of ingredients, regulatory requirements, and other variables, right? So going from a sort of a $45 a month, which is already being, some of that cost is being like eaten by the Stop TB, this global sort of organization. They're already eating some of the cost, and it's $45. And generics could bring it down to like $8 a month, which is a massive drop when you consider the fact that these are in the country that have got it better off. And like Indonesia was one of the ones I mentioned up top, which is like being hit worst by TB, and they don't have this deal. So even though Johnson & Johnson, J&J have said, oh, no, hold on, we've made a deal, and like actually we're not going to enforce our patents in some places, except for the places where we already have pre-existing deals and we have to enforce our patents because we've made deals with other companies, and so I guess screw those countries, but we're not doing as worse as badly as we might be. Like, no, this company is truly horrible. The fact that in the first place there are these deals set up that are causing people to die because they cannot afford medication because it's not as accessible or as affordable is obscene, is disgusting, and you should feel bad about yourself. And much more than just feeling bad about yourself, you should feel horrible. You should feel, I can't even describe what you should be feeling right now, but like seriously, it's truly disgusting that we live in a system that is so comfortable with not only threatening people with death, not just threatening people with death, but actually letting people die, like actively allowing people to die just to turn a profit. Disgusting. That's the world we live in. This is the one big case, remember. There's a bloody iceberg. There are so many more that you probably are unaware of. This is kind of common enough practice that, I mean, we're not surprised to know about extending patents like that because, of course, it's the same as what they've done with Mickey Mouse. It's the same as what they've done with that sort of copyright stuff. So, yeah, it's one thing to do it to art. It's an entirely different thing to do it to life-saving medical treatments. And that's where we are right now. TB is very curable. It's very treatable. It's very solvable. But unfortunately, people want to make money. So, sorry, people that aren't living in the West.
But they did it.
I guess you got to die.
That's the end of it, though, isn't it? They did it. They got Johnson & Johnson to back down.
No.
Yes, they did.
They did, but they didn't.
What do you mean?
Not fully. So they had a deal with the GDF, so they're not enforcing the patents in a number of countries, but not all of them.
Oh.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, like for example, Russia, they've got a deal with a company in Russia, a pre-existing deal, wherein that company has exclusive rights to make and sell this drug. So, unless that company's like, no, don't worry, anyone can have it.
Okay, I didn't know that bit.
Yeah,
wow.
Exactly. Unless something has changed, since time of recording or since I researched this, but to my knowledge, it may seem like it's solved, but still tons of people are dying for no reason. And there you go. Do you want to do a quick fire quiz?
Not really, but dun 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 dun, tuberculosis edition.
So the rules for the quick fire quiz are the same as always. I'll ask one question. Luke, that's one question between you and the audience. If the audience gets it before you, they win. What do they win?
They win 20 years of a monopoly on quickfire quizzes.
Dear Lord, Luke, that's not very good. But do you know what is good? It's the question. What causes TB?
Tuberculosis, Microbacterium tuberculosis.
Well done, ding ding ding. That is correct. You have a monopoly on the quick fire quizzes for
Hooray!
20 years.
I'm going to attempt to extend it at the end of the term.
Well, I'll tell you what's not going to be extended, Luke. It's this episode. So thank you to all of our patrons, with an extra special thank you to executive producers Danito and Glitchrabbit. And thank you for watching. You can find the full references for this episode down in the description. Subscribe for new episodes every Sunday, and why not leave us a nice wee comment? You can support the pod at patreon.com/SciGuys, or you can find and contact us at SciGuysPod on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and at SciGuys on TikTok too. Or you can send us an email at SciGuysPod@gmail.com.
That's SciGuysPod@gmail.com. SciGuysPod@gmail.com.
You can follow me at NotCore everywhere.
You can follow me at Luke Cupforth everywhere.
Goodbye, and also screw you, Johnson & Johnson.
Goodbye, and John Green's a good boy.